And co-living allows for us to all live independently, but creates shared amenities that we can then meet one another. And it's in the places where we actually meet each other that we create connections.
So I just need to introduce you again, please, Carmia. Carmia Young is an architect and who's come up with a co-living proposal over in Lyttelton. At what stage is the project at the moment?
We've just finished the preliminary design, and we've submitted our application for resource consent. The design's now on pause until we get our resource consent. And in the meantime, what we're doing is preparing to pre-sell and pre-lease the building. So the way that property development works in a traditional sense is you need to pre-sell and pre-lease a building before you can unlock bank debt, and basically de-risks the project so banks will come on board.
So how many souls will actually be living? I mean, it's a multi-purpose building, isn't it? But what about the actual residential part of it?
There'll be 26 apartments, and among them they'll have the entire rooftop, which will be a shared deck for them, and those will all be sold separately. And then the ground floor and the basement will be its well-being center. And so what I'm thinking there and what's come out of the community workshops is effectively a place where we can create a daily practice around our mental and physical health. So it's not let's say a health center like you've seen before, but it's a little bit more of a, let's say, a future-inclined health center. And we call it a well-being center.
So what parts of it are co-living and what are shared and which parts are private? So can you explain that to us?
Yeah, and basically everybody will have their own apartment, and in their apartment they'll have their own bedroom, their own kitchen, their own bathroom. But what's the shift and the difference is that you'll also have shared amenities. So you'll have the entire rooftop is shared, and you'll also have some shared laundry facilities and shared bike parking. And nobody will have cars. There's no car parking. And so the idea there is, as well, is to also have access to shared vehicles, possibly Yugo. So what happens when we start to move into co-living is we share the things that reduce our footprint and allow us to, let's say, create connections between us.
So from the sounds of things, there are some compromises, although you might describe them as benefits, but it should cost you less to live.
It definitely should cost a lot less to live. I haven't actually done the math on the difference between owning all of these things for yourself and sharing them. But it would be a really good idea, actually. I haven't actually done that. But yes, life costs are reduced, and you end up having more time because you're not spending so much time making money to pay your bills. So you'll actually have some more time to enjoy with friends and family.
How would you describe your, without going into too much privacy detail, but how would you describe your domestic situation at the moment? How do you live presently?
Well, I live on my own. So I'm currently living in a 2-bedroom, beautiful little cottage in Lyttelton, and it's certainly more than I need. I find that a lot of people like myself who are single and or even couples are often in quite large suburban homes, and there have been some very interesting studies done about how much of the suburban homes people actually use, and there's large parts of the home that actually gets, let's say, underutilized. And the idea of moving into, let's say, smaller living means that you use that space more efficiently, and then you're also not, let's say, cleaning as much, keeping up as much, paying heating for as much, all your rates, etc.
Now,
so there's a huge movement towards living more, let's say, in smaller spaces. I wouldn't call them tiny houses, but I would call them small homes.
Now, for some people, the idea of body corporate jointly owning a driveway is a complete nightmare, and maintenance of the cladding and water tightness, the kind of things we're talking about. Obviously, this is a whole different ballgame. So how are people emotionally going to be able to get their head around a huge shift in how they live?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it is a big shift, and it's a big behavior shift. And I think, body corporates in particular here in Christchurch, there's quite a lot of let's say, fear around them, mostly because there were so many body corporates that really had a lot of challenges in the post-earthquake context. So fortunately, because of that, a lot of the body corporate agencies have learned an enormous amount. So we'll be able to embed some of those learnings into the body corporate. I think, and again, this is a good math question. Your questions are great tonight. If you look at the amount of cost that people spend on a suburban house to maintain it, and if you look at the costs of a body corporate, I'm going to guess it's about a third or a quarter. And so you're actually saving a great deal of money because that maintenance is actually spread across a large number of people rather than just one sole individual for an entire home. And not to mention your costs for landscaping and things like that. So by sharing those costs, it's incredibly advantageous.
Now, it sounds to me, well, it's fairly obvious, actually. You've got a smaller space with quite a few people living there. What about things like noise, children, and animals?
Yeah, so again, spot on. First off, I just want to really preface that this is not for everyone, and we're not trying to create a place for everyone. So this is definitely for people who are either single or the people that are really showing up that are particularly interested in the way that the apartments have been designed. We've been doing workshops for about 2 years. Are people that are just young and fresh out of college and don't want to flat with others, but they want their independence and they don't need a whole lot of space. They need something as a kind of a small first home. And then the other people are people that are either their kids have left and they're separated, so they're single, or their partners have passed away or of some sort. And so this is probably more residential for people who are single, maybe some couples, but there probably won't be children. The apartments are all studios and one bedrooms.
So is there,
and the other thing with pets is I've just done a huge survey with all future residents, and everybody has said no pets. So in the requirements of living there, there's no pets allowed, which is not uncommon in places of this nature.
Is there provision for co-working spaces as well within the same building, so shared office space, for instance?
That's right. So the restaurant will work a lot like, I don't know if you've been to the one over at the Exchange, but the Exchange works like a cafe/co-working. So there'll be free Wi-Fi and people will be able to use that if they like.
Now, I understand investments available to people who might not necessarily be living there. Is that correct?
So the way that we're setting it up, again, this is coming out of the research that we're doing in the surveys and the interviews with potential residents. There's a lot of desire for people to buy these apartments and then use them for Airbnbs, but that undermines the idea of living in a co-living situation because essentially what people do in co-living is they're living there independently, but they know their neighbors. And that there are people that really would like that, and then there are some that wouldn't. And I'm definitely of the mind that it would be really nice to be able to know my neighbors, and but also have my own space. So I think of it a lot like having a home and a whole bunch of friends, which is great. But the idea of sorry, I missed your question again. I lost it.
Well, I'm too busy listening to have remembered. No, I was asking about co-working space. Now we're just about to bring up the artist's impression of what the building's going to look like. Could you just tell us about the site? Is that where the volcano used to be, or is it further along?
No, it's where the old Empire was, and
right,
where the pharmacy was. So Leslie's bookstore, the pharmacy, and the Empire Hotel.
Yeah. Okay, well, the picture's up now, and I can see what looks like is it 3 stories plus a rooftop area?
So there's actually 4 floors. And one of them, because of the sloping site, one of them is, let's say, a basement below London Street.
Yep.
But you'll have light into there. You'll be able to drive into the car park below and the well-being center.
Are you happy that there isn't a visual impact problem here with the nature of the rest of the street?
Is there going to be a visual impact with the rest of the street?
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at how much, to what extent it's in harmony with the architecture of the rest of the street, because it is strikingly different.
Well, I don't know which image you're showing. If you're because I can't see the image myself.
All right.
If you're showing the one that's timber with timber structure exposed, that is no longer the building that we're going to be doing. And we had We had feedback back from the council in March this year, February, March this year.
Yeah.
And one of their main pieces of feedback was the facade and the building itself was out of proportion. It was out of scale with the rest of Lyttelton, and the materials didn't have any relationship. So there's been a huge redesign. And on our Facebook page, you can see some of the new images. We are having some renderings done, so that we'll be sharing those shortly. But essentially what the facade is now and what the building is 4 small buildings rather than one large one.
Yeah.
And the courtyard that was facing the sea, the harbor, is now going to be facing London Street. And the facade material is no longer going to be the timber because, as you well spotted, it's out of context. And what we're doing now, if you look at London Street, we did a photo survey of existing materials along the street. And we have found that there's quite a bit of tile. And what we're going to do is a ceramic tile facade that will mimic the profile of corrugated iron, but instead of it being that fine grain of corrugated iron, you'll scale that by about 2, so it'll have a wave-like feature. So the facade will have quite a beautiful texture. And then the ground floor will be predominantly glazed for commercial, so that you'll have the shop and the restaurant have a visual connection to London and Oxford Street.
Okay, well, what we'll do is after we've finished broadcasting the entire program this evening, we segment it up and we'll post your item as a separate item. And it would be great if you could update our page with the relevant, images so that we're not misrepresenting what you're going to be doing. Very exciting.
The hard part is a lot of the plans are drafted for resource consent. And unfortunately, the renderings, the images that are usually published publicly, are still being worked on. That's because they take quite some time. But as soon as those are finished, you'll see them splashed out all over the Facebook page. I can send you what are essentially the elevations of the building, which were prepared for the resource consent.
Great stuff. You're still in the fundraising stage. How far have you got to go?
Actually, we're not. That's closed.
Okay, right.
And we finished the equity crowdfunding campaign in March. And that was New Zealand's first equity crowdfunding for commercial development, which was quite groundbreaking. We raised $500,000, which was amazing, and we have 320 new shareholders on board, which is also really amazing. So the whole point of this building is to be co-conceived, co-designed, but more importantly, co-owned. And so the buildings that we want to build in our towns and cities are things that we can generate and work on together.
Thank you so much for talking about the Colletts Corner project this evening. We'd like to invite you to come on the programme again, actually, perhaps next week or the week after, and talk about the future of work and how we might, or rather should be, all working rather less than we are now.
Sounds like a great topic and one that would be close to my heart.
Carmia Young, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good evening.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to take a very short break now, and then I'll be back with a new segment for us, a weekly look in the garden with Kim Odering here on After Dark.